Welcome to Fool's Gold with Cara Cordoni. The views and opinions expressed on Fool's Gold do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast, its host, or its producers. Any content provided by our guests, contributors, or authors represents their own opinions and experiences and is not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, or entity. Hello and welcome to Fool's Gold. I am your host, Cara Cordoni, and today our conversation is really about why this podcast, what is it about, and why am I doing it? And in order to really unpack all of that, I have my friend Stuart Parkinson as a guest, and we are going to explore fools, large group awareness trainings, the preponderance of cons and glamour, and how do we develop discernment? How do we separate the fool's gold from the real gold? So, welcome to my show. I'm so happy to have you here,
Hi.
Stuart, all the way from Spain. And yeah, I'm just delighted we get to have this conversation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we've had a lot of them, haven't we? So just the first recorded one, which will be really
Yes.
fun. I'm
Yeah.
actually in Berlin at the moment, so
Oh,
it's about 20 degrees colder than it would be in Spain, but
yeah,
it's really nice, and I'm somewhere cozy with a friend.
fantastic. And so you and I met in the context of the online world. Our paths overlapped in the calling out problematic organizations. I think in particular, we have people in common with the International School of Temple Arts. And so you and I started a conversation that has just really blossomed over the year. Yeah, so what's your background and brought you into that conversation?
Well, yeah, I think was it on the group on the Facebook group Tantra Not Trauma that
I
we
think so
originally
first,
met.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
that's worth a shout out because I think the people who started that group have offered an amazing resource for people. Um, and yeah, I was on that because it would gradually people would gradually come into my life who'd been very negatively affected, sexually assaulted, or raped by people to do with this organization, and or allegedly, as I suppose I probably have to say.
I do have a
Um,
disclaimer at the beginning, but yeah, allegedly is good.
okay, cool. And so I was it was a constant thing that would nag at me after an old friend of mine ended up heavily involved in the organization. Um, and intermittently I'd go on like research dives to well, I had a very clear hunch from the moment I saw the website like 12 years ago or something that something was really up, but then essentially there was very little you can do with people going into it. Everyone's on their path and you don't always know what is good and what isn't good, but you can have your gut instinct. Um, so then I ended up on that group again and really just doing like a kind of a final like, am I insane? Is this all crazy? Which is it? And that's how we ended up talking. Um, did you ask me to introduce myself? You probably
Would you
did, didn't you?
introduce yourself?
I would, yeah. So I am, I don't know, a strange fish. I grew up in the UK, but I was born in the United Arab Emirates. My mum is Irish, my dad's from England, and I live between Spain and the UK. Um, I've had a long career in advertising strategy, communication psychology, and experience design, which is outfitting um, areas for interactive experience. So essentially, like using language and experiences to change people's behavior. So I guess I came from all of that with a very unique perspective. Also, I'm pretty deeply neurodivergent and So I had a different framing of a lot of what was going on. I think I owe a lot to my dad, who was a particularly smart, um, the right side of cynical
Mhm,
about what the game was. And so I had some quite early um, awareness, safety with awareness built as to what the dominator game is. And we'll get on
mhm,
to the word dominator, but essentially a kind of a hierarchical capitalist world that is at the moment largely driven by patriarchy, but dominator implies something slightly higher level going on. Um, and so I have been, well, I make music, I write poetry, I study psychoanalysis and spirituality, East and West. I am very interested in interfacing with people and what stops that and why everything sucks, and how it doesn't have to,
mhm.
I would say, is my primary passion.
Yeah, I think when I saw your comments in the group and then we started exchanging, I really appreciated the clarity and incisiveness, that you brought to analysis or breaking things down, kind of opening up the assumptions, opening up the context and, that you had a very, again, incisive, very direct, but you're also very kind and caring, and I think that's been a place, um well, you've been kind and caring and interacting with me, and I see you wobble your head. Um and I think that's something that a lot, I admire and finding that for myself because I've been such a good girl. I've been so polite. I've been,
Right.
conditioned for safety compliance, fawning, all of these things. And so part of this journey, with the podcast, is me reclaiming and maybe finding my voice for, um, not the first time, because I think there's been layers to it, but this new extension of myself, to be able
Mhm.
to just say it and not mince my words and not make apologies and excuses and, um, yeah, avoiding confrontation. And part of that isn't just avoiding the confrontation, it was that really deep conditioning, uh, that is like, I didn't even know I was avoiding it, I guess would be part of what I was saying. There was just this, like,
Sure. Well,
maneuvering.
with avoidance, I think it's what a lot of people. I think you mentioned excusing without behaving without excusing things. I think there's a wild difference between explanations and excuses,
Mm,
and they're often very conflated. And in the very, I don't know, defensive, transactional, hierarchical culture we have, you have a lot of people using explanations as excuses. But I like to use explanations. There's a saying in that's apparently mistranslated in the Dhammapada, which is the sayings of Buddha that says, "Let understanding fight for you."
mm,
And I think there's kind of no stronger weapon than understanding, because out of that comes strategy. It comes the right action, almost without you having to. You don't have to believe it. It becomes self-evident what has to happen, I suppose. And so I can act from that place a lot. I often don't as well. Um, but with what you were talking about, you know, I have a lot of privilege, and I a lot of that privilege, I would say, is one of the biggest hidden parts of that is that I was relatively safe and secure as a child, and my nervous system was allowed to develop a very safe center whereby what the world was didn't pollute me too much, and I could still know who I was even if I was in something that sucked, or I was able
mm,
to take on information, not be overwhelmed by emotions, and therefore be responding, not reacting to the world. And I think what my a lot of my adult life, or at least in the last 10 to 15 years, has been trying to help people cultivate that and believe that, n show people where they have it, right? Because you're not finding your voice for the first time. You have a
mm,
voice,
right.
of course, but it's only allowed to come out with people you feel very safe with, or it's only allowed to come out in these situations. Or, and really, it's about a lot, as is with any quest of even liberation, which we can get onto as we talk about some of these large group awareness trainings. I think a fundamental ethical pillar would be that I'm not giving you anything you don't have as
Right.
part of any relationship, but I might be helping you uncover things that you don't know how to use that you have.
Mhm.
Or I might be helping you polish the mirror, or we might be building this 3 more levels of this building together of what your capacity is or your resilience is, but it's your building, it's your,
Right.
it's your capacity. So I that feels a bit wandering, but I think it points to how, well, it points to the, I guess, the modality in which we've been engaging, which is very much about saying, "Well, you've got it." And I think a lot of these things that we can talk about a bit more later on, one of the fundamental problems in a lot of the I think it's important we classify what world we're talking about maybe
Mm.
in this, and people probably don't know what large group awareness trainings are, but we can get onto that. But I guess healing culture as it exists within a capitalist landscape, and what that means often depends on convincing people that they need things, um, which I did in advertising. It's just very different to be selling people a Hyundai
Mhm.
that might make them feel good driving down the street, to convincing them that what if they give you £2,000 for the week, then they will be liberated and free and sexually and intimately complete. Like, it seems like there is a line there for me, but I would like to investigate that on this
Mhm.
publicly. I think it's worth talking about because we're all complicit in this system and we
Mhm.
all have to make a living. So I guess that also comes back to the explanation versus excuse thing.
Yes.
Is, it's important to recognize the humanity within even our biggest adversaries and even the most violent and horrendously behaving people, without condoning or excusing those things. But we do have to be able to understand, well, James Hillman talks about the ultimate act of psychology being an act of sympathetic imagining, which is to,
Mm.
like, try to imagine why that feels like a good idea for the person doing it,
Mm.
even and if that's the most horrendous thing you can imagine, right? Which is where modern psychology finds that completely taboo and unacceptable.
Mhm.
But I think it's an important part of discourse.
Yeah. Yeah, so why am I doing it? Why am I here? Why do I care?
Yeah, right?
We have the phrase, like, I've always been a seeker, and I think that's an interesting one. I look back at my childhood, and my parents are not in any way religious or spiritual. And as a l
That they know
even
of.
that they know of or claim or right, identify as. Um, and I started looking. I was attracted as a middle schooler to the Catholic Church because there was French Catholic nuns that ran an after-school program, and they gave away ice cream and all kinds of goodies that I wanted. And I was a latchkey kid, so I was pretty much going home alone to eat in front of the TV anyway. And so I signed up to do this catechism, and it fell apart
What
for a
is that?
couple
Sorry.
reasons. Oh, catechism is like the indoctrination of children or adults into the Catholic Church.
Okay.
It's the study of the
Like also with including baptism and things like this?
right, I was before all of that, so there's confirmation and yeah, I wasn't a child that was baptized. I'm not gonna be able to, like, spell it out, but yeah, that's the
Sure, sure,
journey
sure.
to full
Okay. The
membership.
journey into being a Catholic.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm, and I got in trouble for a couple of reasons. One, I I think I drew Mary's hair as purple. I kinda made Mary punk in some drawing thing, and I was corrected about that. And then more importantly, I attended mass with my father, and this was before the days that you could go up to a priest and if you were not a Catholic, you could still receive a blessing. Like they do that now, where you just go up and you don't ask to
Yeah.
receive the host. But that was not, and I didn't think I was supposed to go in line. My dad kinda encouraged me, and I got up, and the French priest basically was like, "You're not supposed to be here," like, and I took it, whether it was real rejection sensitivity, true humiliation, I was devastated. I felt very humiliated, and I never went back, and when I didn't return, I had the experience of running into the nuns at the school, and I was, I would say hi, and they totally ignored me.
Wow.
They just completely, so, I didn't take that as maybe the lesson it could have been, and learned. I was like a little kid, and I kept
How old were
looking.
you during this period?
I
Sorry,
must have been
just to
like
contextualize.
9, 10,
Okay, okay.
pretty yeah. Um, and then I kept
So you said you
seeking.
oh, yeah.
I kept
You said you
seeking.
didn't yeah, the lesson, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, it's
You didn't
alright.
take this as the lesson it could be.
Right, right, like, I didn't know how to put those pieces together or know that that's, like, a pattern in organizations where there's the inside and the outside and the shunning, like, the unkindness and shunning of people who are outside of the group, especially if you're a leaver in any way.
Mhm.
Um, and So in my early 20s, I met a really fascinating, charismatic character, a Greek man born in Egypt and raised in LA, an artist. I was 24 and he was turning 50. And
Wow.
he really was the first to introduce me to, like, consciousness, like, let's talk about and let's open the senses. And he had a lot of background in um, all kinds of mysticism, though he identified as a Christian. But he introduced me to Rumi, and he introduced me to Gurdjieff. That was his big uh, teacher. He claimed to be the great nephew of Gurdjieff and to have been named by him. And so that is a whole esoteric line of exploration. So I was kind of it was funny because in reflection, I was like, there was this connection with Vranas, my ex, and then there was a way almost that I was a disciple of Gurdjieff through him, through the
Mhm.
books and through my imagination that created that,
So you were
yeah,
part of a lineage in some way.
yeah, yeah, and ultimately, that was a very narcissistic, damaging relationship, isolated, um, through a period of intense pressure, I cracked, like, I literally had a moment that we were sitting in a cafe, and he had been telling me, God loves you so much, and the end times are coming, and this is your chance for salvation. And I kept just brushing it off. But I persisted in exposing myself to him despite that. And over the period of him gaining influence, this moment in the cafe, and he was like, "You have to understand, there's going to be blood up to our armpits. Like, the war is happening. You need to prepare. You'll never have children. You need to take care of other women with children. You need to be a helpmate." And I literally had like a breaking experience where all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my God, this is real. This is real. You
Right.
you have opened me into the real world." And that led to, like, just a life of so much shame. I was the sin and uh just so much shame and entrapment.
Could
Um,
could you thread those 2 things together? Because I'm you've told me some of this stuff before, but having put it that opening into the world, so you're presented with this, I mean, very direct apocalyptic vision, which I think would also be interesting to discuss now, given the state of the
yeah,
world.
yeah,
But obviously, like there's ways of talking about there's ways of talking about disaster and despair that don't sound like what you've just described. but and ways of talking about potential roles within it that aren't prescriptive. But how would you link hearing this in this opening moment then with shame? I don't quite follow.
Sure. I mean, I think, it was really the connection with being sinful, with having sinned for so much time up to this point. Um,
Alright, so you were ignorant and then post that, okay, so it was like the grief and feeling like you'd been doing the wrong thing for ages or something.
right, and that I so wanted to be a
Okay.
good person. I was very attracted to Saint Therese of Lisieux, the little pencil in the hand of God. Like, I really, wanted to do good and be good. And and so that all became conflated, and it was like, "Oh, I'm not as good as, these saints," or, "How can I be better? I need to be fixed. I need to work harder. I need to change."
Mhm.
And and then, Vranas, of course, like, that worked. That kept me, um, yeah, entrapped, like, it was part of the psychological setup where I felt ultimately, even though, he was being abusive, that at that point I had made a commitment to God in marrying him, and that even though I realized I wanted to leave him, and this is like 7 years into a marriage, and we had moved abroad, we were living in Egypt at the time,
Wow.
2006, 2007,
Okay.
and um, so I was very isolated again in that way, being we were not in Cairo, we were down in Aswan, so a very small community, and I was writing to priests and writing going like, "How can I get out of this marriage without betraying God? God is gonna be
Wow.
so mad at me because I'm not keeping my word. I'm not, being committed." And I basically, again, got to a different breaking point. I was contemplating suicide. I was like, "I'll just throw myself out the window onto the sidewalk by the Nile, like, it's a shortcut out." And then I actually got a hold of some hash. I hadn't smoked any weed or done any drugs besides a little alcohol for 7 years, and I got a hold of this little chunk of hash, and when I smoked it, I had kind of the aha of like, "Honey, the prison bars are like smoke, like, in front of you, like, you're not
Wow.
tied to the bed, you have access to the money, you like, the prison is not what you really think it is." And so I said
Wow.
to God, I was like, "I'm so sorry, I will make it up to you if this is not what you want, God, like, I will try to do better, but I have to leave. Like, I can't believe you want me to throw myself out the window more than you want me to walk out the door." And
Wow.
so I walked out.
Wow, that's incredible. And harrowing as well. And I'm sorry I mean, that's wild. It sounds like a lot of it sounds like 2 very hurt people, but it sounds like one with an awful lot of power, um, who didn't understand the other person at all, couldn't really see you. Um,
Yeah, I mean, and, he controlled what I wore, how much I weighed, how I wore my hair, um, over time, all of that developed, but it was I didn't have space for me in the relationship is really how it felt,
wow.
was the me getting pushed out, and I didn't know how to stand up for myself. Like, I didn't
No.
know, and I think that goes back some of us who've, grown up with being, ignored or having that lack of
Mhm.
intimate connection with our parents that
Mhm.
I talk about, gaslighting being one of my native languages, that was my, you know, relationship with my father in particular. and it
Being on
was
the receiving end of gaslighting.
yeah, I mean, even just things like you get hit in the, Italian bop, I think we called it, and I'd say, "Ouch, that hurt," and then the answer is, "No, it didn't."
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
just that where it's so confusing as a kid and you can't you gotta survive, you gotta make it okay, you gotta, get
Mhm,
along.
mhm,
And so when I left Vranas and I started therapy, um, I didn't stick with it long enough. I didn't go deep enough. I wanted to make it be behind me. I wanted to find a relationship. I wanted to have kids. And so while I did do, some deconstruction and, uh, I didn't really break down all the pieces of why I was there and how I got stuck and what was I attracted to, and so I was vulnerable. I did the cult hopping thing, so to
mhm.
speak. So, and after
Well,
I'd
there's no
left.
safety net, is there?
No.
There's no safety net for someone who goes through experiences like this, and this is, I think, underpinning a lot of what maybe this podcast wants to be as a contributor, and you as someone I've spoken to about it. There has to be some sort of community or guiding voices and conversation and dialogue, collaborative dialogue around what it is to go through the process of integration in a messy
Mhm.
society where none of us get imprinted sufficiently healthily as much as we could, and a lot of us don't feel safe, or there's huge amounts of neglect and complex trauma in a normal childhood. But
Right.
then you were seeking, what I hear from this story is two very prominent things that are relevant, I think, to what we can talk about more later, is a will to belong, a need to belong. You mentioned that if you didn't go to this Catholic thing, you'd have been having dinner alone, right? Like, I think a lot of people, and then you have esoteric interests.
Mhm.
But those two things are kind of at really different levels of, if you wanna talk about whichever model, whether you wanna talk about the chakra model or Leary's 8 circuit model of consciousness, they're at very different levels of it. Like,
Mm.
belonging is right at the base.
Right.
Um, like, high level spiritual integration and a mystical experience is right at the top. And, I think that's a really big thing to conflate, I guess, not just in your
Mhm.
inner experience, but
Right.
then I'm also putting myself into the head of Ranas, who maybe has some integrative things up here to offer, but you're looking to him for belonging, and he's looking to you to play with these ideas or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It just means that everything is so messy.
Yeah.
And then secondarily, I think it's just worth sharing, um, that when you finally had this vision that you could leave, that was linked with hashish,
It was, yeah.
which is very interesting. And a lot of people, wouldn't read too much into that, or would very much read from a negative point of view, from
Mhm.
the dominator culture would view that as kind of, well, it wasn't a real experience. How could it, how, that was, but really, again, referencing Leary's model again, is certain medicines and plants seem to help us re-imprint in certain ways. It seems like that
Mm.
was the first time you managed to feel safe enough to think clearly, um, and then act in your own interest. But that wasn't integrated. That was just a peak
Right.
experience. And then you ended up just trying to cope again and on the conveyor belt, which is then
Yeah.
what we should talk about and how that sits, because you
Yeah.
went through a number of very interesting experiences, which we can maybe say are interesting now, but also
Yeah.
sound harrowing and
Yeah.
disturbing. So maybe you can talk a bit about where that conveyor belt led you next.
Yeah. Yeah, so the next one, was I was back in San Francisco, and, I had a fiancé, and I met a coach. It was interesting, I was at a little tiny local, bar and dance venue, and there was this striking woman, and she was very bright and friendly and confident and befriended me and offered, some coaching, and this was 2009, and I was interested in getting out of my corporate job and becoming a coach. And I thought, oh, let me, right, learn from this person. Uh, and she invited me to her meditation programs, which were part of a group I found out called the Miracle of Love. And the Miracle of Love was led by kind of a, you know, charismatic leader at the time called Kalindi, who had inherited the spirit from her partner who had died. And now Kalindi has died and supposedly passed on the power to what they call the lady. I didn't know any of that going in. What she said was, we have this week-long retreat. I call it Roto Rooter of the Soul. It's gonna clear you out.
Roto-Rooter.
Yes, so that's
Wow.
like a brand here of like,
Yeah,
plumbing
DIY
repair.
equipment, no.
Yeah,
Oh, plumbing repair, okay,
plumbing
right, yeah, like, so
repair.
a very, very
Flush it
physically
out.
forceful approach.
Flush it out, and she was like, "Before you get married, before you have children, you should, it's like a reset." And I was like, "Oh, I haven't done any personal development work for a number of years." And the other piece that was interesting is I went to the meditation. They did like weekly open meditations, and it was very music, dance, cathartic, release kind of process. And the first time I went, I just thought it was like ridiculous. I wasn't moved. I wasn't intrigued. Um, and then a few weeks later, I had a traumatic incident that really destabilized me. And basically, my father punched my fiance in front of me over a conversation. And I went into kind of a shock and whole kind of dissociation. And in that state, I was like, "Oh, I need to go do that meditation with the music," so it was a place I could go cry and rage and grieve. And all of a sudden, I kind of was in, like, I inned myself and started going to them. And then when she was like, "Go do the week-long thing," I was like, "Cool." And it turned out to be, yeah, there was money. It was like, gosh, it was like, I don't remember exactly that year, but it was like a couple $1,000 for a week in a hotel suite, with 50 other people. And I didn't know the term large group awareness training, LGAT, at the time. But that's what it was. So it came in and there was all these rules, and we weren't to speak to each other. We were to be in a meditative state. And the thing is, I really liked all the rules, Stuart. I was like, I can be an A student. I'm gonna get
Yeah,
everything out of this. I
yeah,
thank you for telling me how I can do that with such clarity. Keep my mouth shut, scream when they say scream. And I
mhm,
really, internalized it, right? Like, and
mhm.
was very focused on the leaders and that power dynamic and being good enough. Um, and then the other piece of that is through, like, this very, like, high energy, cathartic crying and screaming. I got really high, like, I felt really good in an intense and fiery and more able, it felt like, to express myself
Had
more
you ever had
freely.
permission to do that before?
Theater, I was also a theater
Theater?
kid. Yeah,
Okay,
that would
okay,
be the
okay.
place that I look back and I'm like, "Oh, I feel like my theatrical parts and the being able to disappear into stories or other characters or to create realities together, right? As a theater group, or we
Mhm.
create something that doesn't exist, an imaginary world. And so I think going into that and being like, oh, I'm now in your imaginary world that I'm adopting. And with a larger the large group awareness trainings and other cults, they will like, they said they didn't have a dogma, They weren't here to, like, impose anything, but they had a worldview, right? And that started
Mhm.
coming out. So they were like, "You are having an opportunity to not be reincarnated. Like, if you do this work and you keep your eye on the spiritual ball, you don't have to come back. You will be enlightened. You will, you know, be elevated out of this plane of suffering and shit show, and you won't have to come back." And I had never thought of that or cared about that. But what they did is we do these cathartic and music things, and then we'd be resting and they would play recorded tapes of Kalindi talking. And she was saying all these things, "You're on the path, you can escape the cycle, blah, blah, blah." And I had no idea, of course, that in those states, we're incredibly open and it is an opportunity for implanting, reprogramming,
Yeah,
inserting ideas.
re-imprinting. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yep. And so I left that one really high and really determined to find a way that I could live in that peak energy. And they were like, "Well, come back for meditation 3 times a week and do these practices." And I was like, "Okay." And my new husband at the time was like, "What's happened? We were doing band practice 3 times a week, and now you're off with these people. Like, why did your priorities change? What's happening?" And then he was like, "It's a cult. Like, I've done the research." And it was like, they had done the thing where they're like, "Oh, don't believe the stuff online. Don't believe the" those people couldn't handle their experience. So they're having a negative reaction, and so you can just don't bother with any of that. And
Mhm.
I had that kinda shudder going down when he talked, and it was after 2 or 3 months of continuing that, and he was getting more desperate and feeling more lost and abandoned and fearful. And so he actually told me he was gonna visit a Catholic priest for guidance, which was shocking enough. This is someone who was absolutely not in favor, had no background, but he was like, "I know this is an elder that you trust, and I don't know what else to do. I don't have anyone to talk to about what's happening."
Wow.
And it was shocking enough that I said, "Wow, okay, well, why don't I go with you?" And he was like, "Yes, please." And this priest had been in San Francisco his whole life, a Dominican priest, and he had been in San Francisco through the Moonies, through Jonestown. Like, he was there. He had seen these things so many times, and he was so brilliant and kind in that when we met, he never made me wrong. He never put me down. He never belittled me. He never questioned my experiences. What he did, though, was he basically gave me the analogy that mysticism, right, exists. People are mystics in all kinds of traditions, and that it sounded like I was attracted to mystic experiences, mystic practices. And he said, basically, it's part of our human design. If we chant, if we pray all night, if we whirl like dervishes, we do have a shift in consciousness that makes us vulnerable. And he said, think of it this way: you're like the arrow. You've given yourself over. There's the techniques are the bow. And so they're putting the arrow, but who have you empowered to pull it, and where are they aiming? Are they really aiming at your freedom? Do you trust and know them to be aiming you towards freedom, or are they aiming you what basically ends up being entrapment, enslavement, subservience, uh, yeah.
Well, yeah, ultimately sustaining their model, right? And
Mhm.
that's where a lot of this. the model also being an economic one. So
Yes.
it seems like I mean, I want to hear more because I know that you've got a lot more that came after this, but
Yeah.
maybe a little
And
interlude of like
yeah.
of the structural stuff is relevant there
Mhm.
because it's a
Yeah.
brilliant analogy. It's like, and because it also flatters, it's a very interesting analogy because it doesn't, yeah, as you said, it doesn't write off or negate your experience, and it actually doesn't diminish you. It says you're a powerful force. It just says where is that force being pointed, um,
Right.
and where does it want to go? And obviously within, we're talking about the politics of liberation, right? We're talking about liberation theology, as it
Mhm.
is called in the kind of Christian
Yep.
tradition, and then that takes different forms in Hinduism and Vedanta and Buddhism. But ultimately, the reason I went like this is because I really wanted to make sure we're talking about money,
Yes.
because it's like, and because we live in this strange world which doesn't have to be that way, right? An anarchist
Mhm.
called Murray Bookchin says the acid that corrodes all revolutionary thinking is that things must be how they are.
Mhm.
Like, and Graeber, an anarchist anthropologist, says that we imagine the world to be as it is, and we could imagine it differently. We could do it differently. It's a construct. But within the reality that we face, everyone is scared, and everyone is trying to get theirs. Um, and it is. I wonder. I wanted to ask you. We've spoken about this. I think touched on it before. But when you were in some of these experiences, I mean, you've already mentioned that one of the attractive things rooting you in this second kind of, well, this first culty
Mhm.
experience, outside of your relationship, was a will to switch careers. So
Yes.
it was about financial. It was about something to do with commerce, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So how would you comment on, or would you comment on how this experience was internally flowing through you as you were around these people? Did this woman disappear once she'd introduced you to the cult? I mean, was there a pipeline that you could see yourself standing at the front of this thing earning the big bucks, or how did that live
Yeah.
for you?
I didn't really have it so much that time, as far as being like, "Oh, I could be a leader here." It was really, my attachment to that, psychological emotional state versus, like, the employment or this is a path, so I didn't have it with the miracle of love. Um, but it's really interesting you bring up that I was at a career transition because I hadn't made that connection to what happened basically with the next cult, which let's fast forward to post-pandemic. I had a partner for the year of the pandemic. He had a very bad alcohol, problem. It was not a healthy relationship, my codependence, his, issues, and so broke up at the beginning of 2021. And so I was like, "Oh, I wanna do better with my emotional and sexual intimacy skills." I took a course from a gal who had taught her program at Stanford, was very science-based, very slow and thoughtful, and during that program, one of the participants said, "Oh, well, have you heard about the International School of Temple Arts? Have you been to an ISTA retreat? Because that's, where all of this, gets really interesting or where it's, in person." And it was a big piece of
Hmm.
it. And so I got excited, I looked it up, I saw there was gonna be a retreat in Northern California near me. They have retreats all over the world, but there was no way I was gonna be traveling, so there was this opportunity to drive. And I just got really attached to it really fast. I look back and I'm like, "Oh, it's like I projected as much as I saw, or I really fell for the glossy marketing things too." I I I I think, even thinking about the concept of the fool, which we haven't really gotten to, but the fool,
Hmm.
right, is both a very adventurous and innocent and exploratory, um, energy or place. It's like the beginning, um,
Mhm.
but then we also can have kind of the other side, which is just foolishness and, um, I look back and it's like from where I am now, for example, looking the marketing that ISTA, puts out or other cults, I just have such a different set of eyes on it. And I
Mhm.
think it was really my emotional desire, my emotional needs that were telling the story, and I didn't trust or have access to the critical thinking of breaking it down, and that's in a context of being a Northern Californian who's grown up around culty stuff, alternative, the history of the, encounter groups and personal development, right? From the '60s,
Mhm.
'70s,
Mhm.
'80s, like, that's my milieu. I had a middle school teacher who was a devotee of Osho and wore the collar and wore the pendant when we talk about his guru. It was, I've always been very kind of accepting and, very cautious and judging, but I think also to a fault. And that's part of what that fool experience, was that I couldn't really see what was there, because I think I was projecting my desires, my needs, my hopes, and that the marketing and all of that is designed to do that. It is a manipulation. It is,
It is. Well,
an influence.
it wants to sell and sustain itself, and that is it's kind of understandable, but in a situation of so much precarity that so many people are in, not just financially, but relationally and emotionally, and, you have a lot of solutions being sold,
Mhm.
in such a thing, and you also have a way of taking part in it that you can buy, that you
Yeah,
don't have to go in somewhere and slowly make friends or
yeah,
lovers or whatever. You don't have to, and this is part of I guess this is the kind of the caveat emptor or buyer beware thing is actually that, yeah, buyer be super fucking aware because if you can buy it, is it worth it? Like, is it real?
right.
If I said to you, I could find your ideal partner, it'll cost you 25 grand. Would that be something that would make you really cynical or skeptical? For me, it would. If you
Yeah,
said, "I've got the ideal girl for you, Stu, but you're going to need to give me $90,000," I'd be like, "Well, what?" But
but they
within
probably wouldn't ask for it all up front, Stu. It might be
they
a
don't. No, no,
thousand
no.
here and
Exactly.
a couple
You
thousand
might meet her
there.
here. Oh, you haven't met her
Yeah,
here. Oh,
yeah,
maybe next time. But you can see how that well, but also when put down to one person, one relationship, it sounds ridiculous. But when it's sort of conflated with your embodiment, your somatic development, your intimacy development, your social scene, it sort of gets hidden how strange that process is.
right.
If you showed like a healthy, I don't know when the last healthy person existed, but I don't like in a partnership culture in I don't know Minoan Crete
Yeah.
circa 5,000 BC, and you said, "Hey, by the way, in 7,000 years, people will be doing this." I'm sure you would have had some really strange looks.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure.
but obviously, and when you were talking about growing up in Northern California, obviously one of the main thinkers who operated in a lot of the time in California, even though he was from Colorado, was Terence McKenna.
Yes.
But he was at UC Berkeley, wasn't he? I think,
Mhm.
and he laments, you know, he laments that we stopped being able to call bullshit on things.
Yes.
That like the campus of the '60s was the thing where someone would say something that had no evidence and was was a complete kind of woo based sham, and someone would say bullshit, and that it doesn't. I think in many ways we can talk about this. He also coined the term the balkanization of epistemology, which is the fragmentation of the
Mm,
developing of truth or meaning, right? Like, how do we even establish how to have a conversation if
mhm,
there are no rhetorical skills within both parties that can help discern and discuss truth, or
right.
arrive at truth in a dialectic or dialogue driven way. And it sounds like, again, there's money, there's the neoliberal American largely led identity complex, which says, go forth and multiply, like go and find your path and make as much money from it as you can, no matter what it is. If it's UFOs in Nevada, great. If it's Elvis's manager selling "I hate Elvis" stickers at the peak of Elvis mania, great. The most cynical shit completely flies.
Right.
But where that's to do with sex and sensuality, which is where I guess your podcast is at least centered from an experiential point of view, there's a particular danger with that,
Mhm,
right? Like when it's about
mhm.
Elvis, okay, the colonel made some interesting merchandise decisions that were very cynical, sure. But when it's about bodily autonomy and it involves sexual assault and boundary violations, then you end up having to really all through economic coercion or economic transactions, then you end up in a real pickle, I think.
And that's to loop back, so when I showed up at ISTA, I was already working as a leadership coach. I came to, the first retreat. We got into the first circle. The 3 leaders, the 3 facilitators are on the couch. Everybody else is on the floor, so there's this little bit of, like, looking up to, and I had the hook where after not very long, I was like, "Oh, I could do that. Ooh, I wanna do that." They are reducing harm and shame in the world by, the sex positivity. They are traveling the world. They're sitting on the couch, and they're having sex with all these fabulous people. And I
Hmm.
was like, "Wow, how do I get to do that?" And so I
What's
asked
not
the
to love, right?
right, I was like, "Good life, oh my god, scratches all the itches, right? Really?" Um, and so I asked the organizer, the woman who had put the group together, I was like, What's the path to being a facilitator?" And she said, "Well, it's not very clear. It's like, not really, but if you already have a big coaching business, that would be more attractive." I don't think she used that word, but and so I was like, "Well, gosh, I wanna switch gears from leadership into sexuality coaching." And so I asked her about her background, and then after ISTA, I pretty much signed up for this, like, sex, love, relationship coaching from another very culty person of charismatic bullshit. And then I was really on the track, right? Because I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, I'm building not only to get to keep going to these peak experience wild retreats, I'm invested in now working my way onto the couch." And so the other steps that you take to do that is you sign up to be an assistant.
Hmm.
The
For free.
assistants well,
Or do they
you
get paid?
pay. I paid.
You pay to work. Love it.
Because don't you understand, I'm both a participant and an assistant. So I did get a small
Okay.
discount. We get a small discount, couple
Great.
$100, which Um, but then they also say, like, the assistants are the keepers of the culture. And, we are the eyes and ears on the floor that report back to leaders about how people are doing. So,
Hmm.
red flags, green flags, but, basically, we're leading these small groups and we're reporting out and we're doing all the physical labor, set up the room, move the couch, change the pillows. You'll have less breaks, you'll have all this. But now you're like a step inside. I get to more
Mhm.
time with the facilitators. I'm looked up to by the new participants.
Mhm.
And so that power and that becoming the insider is a big piece of it. So yeah, you pay to work. It's amazing. Not many cults
But
have
with
that.
this cat well, with this pipeline and with this carrot, right? I mean,
Yes.
it essentially sounds like a microcosm of the regular job market, right? Which is you pay to go to college to learn what you would need to earn money to then pay back what you spent to go to college. Like,
Right.
you
Right.
know, it's like an accelerated microcosm of it, whereby
Yeah.
and super private and with again I think there's a difference between going and learning a skill or something that can be exchanged for money in the future versus something that is kind of like a bit of a crapshoot within a cult that you have to pay £1,000 a week for or more.
Yeah.
um yeah,
Yeah.
it's very strange. And what snapped you out of it?
With the International School of Temple Arts in particular?
Yeah,
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 that was, so I attended 3 retreats total. So I went to the first one, 6 months later, I went and I was an assistant, so I got to see more behind the screen, and then 6 months after that, I did their level 2 training. Um, I had signed up to be an assistant again in 6 months. And mid-year in 2022, one of my facilitators had posted a post on Facebook, and it was really mixed mess. Like I couldn't. It was unclear. She mentioned there was a group of people that were upset that had formed a Facebook group, and then it was just very unclear. So I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go check out that Facebook group. Like, what's going on?"
a bit of
And
Barbra Streisand effect, no?
I
Have
don't
you heard of
know.
this?
No.
Barbra Streisand wanted the picture of her house to be taken off the internet or out of a magazine or something, and it caused everyone to look at her house, essentially. Like,
Right.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's now known as that when you draw attention to
okay.
something you don't want to have attention. Was this group Tantra Not Trauma?
It was, not Tantra, not trauma, though I found that next. It was actually called Issues with Ista and Haydn. We called it IWI, was like the short name, and the
Right.
group was like, "This is a place for people who've been harmed," and me and my enthusiastic foolishness, I was like, "Hey, I wanna know what the problems are because I wanna help make it better. I can be a bridge to bring this
Mhm.
information into the organization." And and so they let me join. I was maybe the 60th. We ended up in 4 months having 600 people in the group, so
Right.
it
Right.
blossomed or bloomed or and I started reading accounts of people who had been harmed 10 years ago, 9 years
Mhm.
ago, 11 years ago, and it burst my bubble. That I thought this group is different. This group really cares. This group is doing good. Um, these people would address their harms, and it was assault, coercion, victim blaming, deflection, Darvo. That's actually where I learned the term Darvo when you bring
Do you wanna go
someone
into what that is?
yeah,
Yeah.
so if I was like, "Stu, I really feel hurt that you used this language, and I feel like that, that really hurt my feelings." And then in response, you turn that around, you defend, "Oh, I didn't do that." It could be denial, but it can also be like, "Well, I only did that because I love you." And don't you actually see how you're the problem here? And why are you making me the bad guy? Like, and so it's basically defend, attack, reverse victim and offender. And
Mhm.
so it's
Mhm.
often where you bring someone a grievance and then you end up leaving feeling like the bad guy and ashamed.
Mhm.
You've been Darvoed. And that had happened with when I was an assistant, that happened with the main facilitator in front of all the assistants and facilitators that I brought up concerns in a feedback session designed to do that, and I
Mhm.
was immediately Darvoed, and my response to the Darvo was, "Oh my god, you're right. It's all my fault. I'm responsible. I can go fix this. Thank you so much for caring about me enough to cruelly wound me."
Well, yeah,
Um,
because you're in in that moment, your desire blinds you from being able to be real, right? So you
yeah,
have put belonging and your future
yep,
pipeline with them above your internal voice, and I think it's very important to know that I think everyone who's involved with organizations like this has also done that. And
yeah,
these cults are kind of self-sustaining, and somehow you're lucky enough. I guess you brought back the fool, right? So it's like the fool got you into trouble,
yeah,
but the fool also got you out of trouble because you were open enough to still look and ask.
yeah,
Um, and it's like the fool is only bad when it's out of balance. In fact, it's a
mhm,
very, very good thing because it will have you going, hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense. And you'll be the only one in the circle saying
right,
that. And everyone will think you're an idiot, but you will know that it
yeah,
doesn't make sense.
right, yeah.
So it's an archetype to honor for sure, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it's one that I embrace over and over again because my performativeness, my, yeah, my desire to look good, be smart, be impressive, all these things get in the way, and I have to, go again and be like, "Yeah, that's the wrong orientation." Like, can I come back to the
Mhm.
innocence, creativity, curiosity, vulnerability of being the fool?
Yeah.
And it's by being more honest about that that I actually have more defenses now and more, boundaries and as far as being like, "Oh, the fool also is the jester who can say, 'Ha, ha, 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 that's bullshit.'"
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know? It's not just
Yeah.
the innocent part, it's also the, like, "Oh, I can laugh at power and mock
That's right. There's
bullshit."
kind of there's like they talk about this in astrology, but there's the kind of like, well, it's like the healed fool.
Yeah.
So there's like, I would say then there's this kind of ascent within the archetype of the fool from not
Right.
knowing anything at all to actually being so deeply in tune with yourself that you don't know anything at all about a bunch of things that you know are bullshit. And your internal compass is leading the way, and you become essentially impermeable to it, which is maybe what you
Right.
spoke about with me at the beginning, which is like my bullshit meter is just it makes life and there's a cost to
Yes.
this because you will be alienated because most
Mhm.
of society is bullshit.
Mhm.
And so, but you will find conversations and people that aren't. And
Yeah.
again, you trade. It's almost like in marketing, they talk in positioning. They say you have to be prepared to lose people. Like the ideal thing will be that some people really, really, really want to buy your shit, and most people don't. Then you're actually
Right.
doing something.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
and you mentioned vulnerability, but I think sincerity also plays into
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
um, which is again something that's increasingly dying. And we
Mhm.
talked about, didn't we, what it is like. This could bring up kind of, well, Darvo first of all just sounds like a manual of narcissism. It sounds like
Yeah.
a process that describes what it is to be so fragile that
Mm.
you can never be at fault. But then, what is the contra to this? So vulnerability seems like one thing that's a definite contra to this, but vulnerability can be weaponized, obviously, right?
Yes.
Like,
Mhm.
um, but there's some things that are slightly different, slightly more difficult to fool. And I guess you mentioned being liked or being well thought of, and being unpopular is a
Mhm.
thing that's, again, that can be strange because that can be weaponized and is being
Yeah.
weaponized by different commentators on the right, perhaps, who are saying, well, because people hate me, that means I know I'm right and I'm saying the
Yeah.
truth.
Right.
But unpaid is one that's harder to fool.
Right. Right. And that
Like,
was
am I
something.
making profit from this interaction?
Right, and that was something Vranas always prided himself on, that whenever he did Gurdjieff's work or led sessions, it was never paid. There was never he was very clear on that, which was interesting as a distinction. And then coming
Mm,
into the center and then coming into ISTA and being like, "Oh, this is business." Like, all this other stuff, when it gets down to it, these are businesses. They are making
yeah,
bank, they are getting free labor, they
yeah.
are functioning very much within the world, right? As much as they're like, it's about the shamanism or the spirituality or these other things.
Mhm.
And I was naive about it. I was resistant, right? I didn't want the suffering of having to deal with um, in the context of my own spiritual bypassing, my own toxic positivity, like the whole culture of new age framing, my own prosperity gospel or wealth gospel
Mm,
conditioning.
mhm.
Um, Even though I was like, "Oh, I don't believe in the law of attraction," the concepts, the memes of the culture, right? I was fully engaged in
Being
all of
poor is
that.
kind of a sin, and it's kind of your fault. Like,
It's
it says, right? Like,
yeah, you can change it. Like, it's your fault, and if you don't change it, it's because 'cause you're not changing it. It has nothing to do with
yeah,
systems, culture,
no,
society,
no.
right? Context, yeah,
Funnily
systems.
enough, a gospel written by one of the richest men ever in America, Carnegie,
Yeah, I know, right?
right? Like, oh, great, let's believe that. But it's. I mean, I lived in LA and I saw this firsthand as well.
Yeah.
And I people would always ask me wondrously, "How was it your time in LA?" Because LA is thought of as this amazing place. And I just the only way I could describe it was like everything you've known about living in the world has had gloves on, and living in the States is gloves off.
Bare knuckle
It
boxing.
is it is bare knuckle boxing. There is nothing there is no
Mm.
pretense of a fair fight. There is no
Mm.
fettering of the most brutal mechanics of extraction and
Mm.
exploitation. There is none of that. And it's pretty harrowing all in all. And I was in a privileged position within it. I was earning a decent salary and I was physically safe, and I was
Yeah.
still horrified.
Yeah.
So it is again a very to talk about it structurally is to talk about the soil that everyone's in and the decisions that they're making. I guess if you say hurt people, yeah, to a point, and then
Right.
I guess we all have to stand up and maybe do what Ista insists on everyone doing, which is take personal responsibility,
Right.
but more personal responsibility for how monstrously exploitative and selfish and transactional we've all been,
Right.
rather than insisting that victims take personal responsibility for the violence an organization has committed against them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the
Uh,
capitalism is built from this. It's built from one rule for me and another rule for you. You have
yes.
yeah, right? Like it seems the hypocrisy is the system.
Yes. And it protects and perpetuates itself, right? Because in in that system, if when I take responsibility for everything, which gives me a false sense of control, right? If it's my fault, I can change it. It won't
Mhm.
happen again. So, if I take responsibility for everything, I have that false sense of control, I don't need to, uh, fight the system. I don't need to stand up
Yes.
for others.
Yes.
I'm completely self-involved, referencing,
Yeah,
and
self-flagellating as well. I mean,
yes,
and the
yes,
shaming
yes, yes.
are all sort of manifestations of like negative ego or inverse
Mhm,
ego, aren't they? They're kind of like
mhm,
if the violence if the violence can't be emancipatory or revolutionary outwards towards toxic soil, it
right.
then goes inwards. That same impulse goes inwards and is essentially like the tool of control of the system operating within you
Yes, Right.
keeping you I don't know, it's so funny, isn't it? Because that say that I mean, there's a quote falsely attributed to Buddha, I think it says, "The problem is not you think too much of yourself, nor too little of yourself, but only of yourself."
Ah,
And there is a
right.
deep narcissism
Yes.
in "It's all my fault" as
Yeah,
well, but
absolutely.
one that we have to contend with differently to the people at the front of the class who have earned £100,000 for a week,
Right.
um, jerking yourself off on a fancy velour cushion
Right.
or whatever it
Yeah.
is, or murdering or killing a goat, as I've heard happens.
We killed a rabbit in my level 2.
A rabbit. Cool,
Yeah,
cool,
over
great.
Easter, so that was special.
Okay, welcome to the Christmas Easter. We'll be killing Santa.
And then the other piece, and you mentioned carrot earlier, which always I perk up because, the ultimate sacred ritual at the end of level 2 is anal penetration with a carrot, a root vegetable
Oh,
for the root
for
chakra.
the root chakra. Wow, wow, amazing. So
So
creative.
carrot comes up dangling the carrot, sitting on the carrot. How do so many things we can do with the carrot.
Oh
Um,
my god. Well, and that must happen obviously during winter because it's from a snowman, I imagine, like a snowman's nose.
no, that would maybe in some places. I didn't get the bonus of
Maybe, yeah,
the
I'm not sure.
snowman aspect. Just the irony and or synchronicity that it literally was over Easter, and so we had a
Wow,
joke that we were follow the Ista bunny instead of the Easter bunny. It was follow the Ista bunny into
wow,
the underworld because that's a death
wow.
and rebirth initiation, as they call it. So you go dark. So we have a few more minutes today, and I'm hoping that we will schedule a second part of this discussion.
Yeah, I hope so too. I hope so too. Is there anything else that we should just cover before we finish?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm wondering where we can kind of bring it all together for where we did explore today.
I
Um,
mean, big themes seem to be I guess if I were listening to this, I'd be like, "So what so leave me with something where I should be looking." We've tried to do a little bit about the kind of contra narcissist things, um,
um,
but, like, in terms of liberation or these instincts of mysticism or
mhm.
belonging, maybe we could talk about that, I don't know.
I mean, the one that you mentioned that I think is worth repeating and really figuring out how to both understand and embody it for ourselves and with each other, is even as the priest said, and as they didn't give you anything. It was not from outside. Your capacity to have these experiences, that is yours. Uh,
Mm.
I had a woman who left one taste, and she said, "But I had these amazing experiences, and I don't want to discount them or what they meant for me, and I feel like they did that or they were," and I said, "No, you brought yourself and you brought your capacity." Yeah.
What's one taste?
Oh, One Taste is, another cult. It is called Om meditation, orgasmic meditation. It was
Okay.
run by Nicole Daedone, who is now in jail in New York awaiting sentencing
Well, they got
as
one.
they got Keith Raniere, the head of Nexium. He is serving a 120-year sentence. He has run out of appeals.
Wow.
And so we are seeing in the States some more progress in going after these cult leaders, especially around labor laws. It's actually been not so much always the coercion or the sexual assault, but actually free labor. issues that
Wow.
and
Wow.
trafficking in different ways. But so
But
anyway,
sorry, so this woman was saying, yeah, about
yeah.
this. You said to her, "This is your experience."
Right. So she was like, "Do I testify in court?" Like, that's really where she was, is I don't feel right testifying and calling out of the harms when I had all these good insights and experiences. And this comes up over and over. We don't wanna throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
Mhm.
And we feel like, or we're told, or we assume that by calling out the harms and the criticisms and the errors, somehow that we lose, or we've been made wrong, or we can't keep those things. And I
Mhm.
struggled with
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
with when I got out of Miracle of Love, as well as leaving ISTA, that and it comes up with sex too, right? Where it's like when you have this beautiful sexual experience and you have these experiences, they are your experiences. They were in relationship, they're in not isolation. So they are in relationship, but they are your body, your experiences, your capacity, your
Yeah,
self.
even falling in love, right?
Yeah.
Ras will say it was your love. You happened to be the key that
Yes.
unlocked the place that is love within me, which is
Yes.
again maybe a very liberating idea. Not that you're right to bring this up because it does say that you can access rich and worthwhile things even if they're in toxic or difficult circumstances, and it doesn't mean.
This is true.
And discernment, I guess, is about saying, well, I'm gonna mop up how I reach those experiences, and I'm gonna be
Mhm.
more discerning about how to get to them again.
Mhm.
Um, because I guess you end up having a conversation about getting high, right? And addiction is around getting high from the wrong places.
Right. Yep.
Um, but doing the work doesn't feel quite as good as watching TV, I don't know, and eating popcorn or whatever it is in the short term. It
Right.
doesn't seem to. I don't know. Maybe we can have a conversation about dopamine and kind of
Yeah.
pseudo neuroscience, but I don't know. I don't know enough about that to really say. But it does seem like in a
Well,
culture of instant gratification, these things will get hairier,
yeah. Yeah.
probably.
And we can definitely, I'm hoping to have, John Hunter on, who wrote the book Manufacturing Mania, which
Oh,
specifically is the research of large group awareness trainings, including EST, Landmark, and
amazing!
the experience of the high that we call transformation, which he is theorizes is a dopaminergic defense mechanism, so we can go into that later.
Wow.
And so yeah, there's the science, there's the psychology, there's the culture, there's capitalism and misogyny and patriarchy, and so we're all in all those soups trying to navigate, my little foolish way to being okay with myself and being able to just be and do in the world. And that is also the fool's journey. We're all the fool exploring and experimenting and attempting, I believe, to
Hmm.
find our way. And so that's a lot of what the rest of the podcast will be about too.
Great, great.
Yeah. Any last goodbyes, thoughts, Stuart?
Well, just I think a story built from what you just said, or inspired by what you just said, because I think the word fool is very much present in a lot of Zen and Taoism,
Mm,
um, and in the idea of also mistakes that come to
yes.
mind, right? And I think there's a story about a guy who goes to a Zen master and says, "Master, my life is a complete mess. I make mistakes with my wife. She hates me. I drink too much. My teenage son is out, never at home, never doing the chores. My daughter doesn't want to speak to me." And the Zen master just puts their hand on the guy's shoulder and says, "My son, my life is one continuous mistake. Like this embracing of constant foolishness, I guess, is the way. Give up appearances. If you give up
Yes.
appearances by fundamentally knowing you could never keep them up, right? It's like the kind of self-evident release and surrender that you can have. But it doesn't happen at these it doesn't happen at peaks. It doesn't happen in power poses
Mm-mm.
and in orgasmic peaks. It just happens in the kind of soggy, quotidian, day-to-day mess of things. But like the conversations we
Yes.
have, being able to admit how messy everything is and laugh about it, I guess,
Yes.
is the medicine, and hopefully we can build through this a bit of community of people who want to do that too. And I think it's important to say also that inviting people to be in touch with me and obviously with you about
Mhm.
these things, these themes, as wide reaching as they may be, to actually say, let's like use this to create solidarity and dialogue rather than also
Right.
just it being a passive consumption while you're making some muffins in the kitchen or something, but like message us as
Yeah,
well,
yes.
right?
Absolutely, yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for there to be engagement and get responses, especially for, from the genuine people that are, like, trying to understand or deconstruct or construct, right? It's not all
Yeah, yeah.
deconstruction, there's actually construction
Mhm.
that we've
Mhm.
talked about, and so we'll unpack that some more. Thank you so much. This has
Cool.
been so
Thank you so
delightful.
much for having me.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for today's episode. Thank you for joining us on Fool's Gold. I hope to see you next time. Bye. This episode was recorded at Access Humboldt and produced by Paxton Scarberry, Shanti Chakravarti, and John Friedman. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.